All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast, and welcome to the show on this Monday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. And we have a special guest. Today, we have Pinky Santino, who is a former professional wrestler, current announcer, and commentator who trained out of the Santino Brothers Wrestling Dojo. He is currently a dialysis patient waiting on a new kidney with hopes of getting to complete some unfinished business in the wrestling world. Pinky, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So listen, I got to ask because I don't know that I've ever asked. Everybody knows you as Pinky. What's your shoot name?
Oh, to be honest, what I would tell everybody is Chris, but there's a different actual shoot name. I usually don't tell people that one.
Okay, sounds good. Well, listen, when I first met you, there was a reputation that came with Pinky Santino, and it was a very good one. It was you were known as someone that was very strong, very very good in the ring. And I remember having my first match with you, and I was a little bit intimidated, quite honestly, because when you see you come out and you're all in gimmick, and I mean, looking pretty badass, right? And what I found to be the best part of your reputation is that you were the easiest person to work with and a very humble person to work with in the ring. So I'll never forget that chance to work with you. I think we really only had one match, but again, your reputation was kind of the hype behind your gimmick, but the person behind the scenes was a much more humble, of course, being part of the group Hate at the time, right? That was a very, big deal. So anyway, can you tell us a little bit about, kind of your childhood and where you grew up? And then we can kind of maybe go from there, obviously getting into talking about professional wrestling. And I would love to talk about your health right now and some changes that you've made in your life.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the city of Pico Rivera. Not a lot of people know where that is because it's kind of a smaller city. It's kind of East LA. So if anyone knows where Montebello or Whittier is, it's between those two.
Mm-hmm.
But starting up, I started actually following wrestling because of my older brothers. I have two older brothers, and they watched it, so it was kind of a thing where I was just kind of watching it to, keep up with them.
Mm-hmm. And how much older are your brothers?
My eldest brother is 10 years older than me. Then the other one is about 7 years older.
Okay, so definitely a big age gap, and I'm sure that your brothers were, someone that you looked up to. Talk about your parents a little bit too.
My mom for the most part was a stay-at-home mom when I was younger. Later on she became a bus driver, and my dad wasn't there that often, just for the fact that when I was he's a truck driver. And truck drivers a hard life. You're not home very often,
mm-hmm.
but he made it possible to provide for the family at that age. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I had growing up. One of my best friends growing up, his dad was a truck driver. I remember how excited he would be when his dad would come home, from work, being on the road for many days. And just the excitement that he would show when his dad did come home. And then some of the times that he got to go on the trips, go on the road with his dad and be in the truck. I'm sure you had some fun experiences with that.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think they could get mad at about it anymore. I actually drove the truck way when I wasn't supposed to. My dad, he delivers fruit and produce to the army bases. Okay. So one time we went out to Fort Irwin, and we were driving back in the desert, and I don't know what we got into this back and forth, and it was like that scene from Over the Top.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly what I was thinking.
Where I was like, this doesn't seem so hard. He's like, oh really? Okay, come on over. We're in the middle of the desert. There's no one around. It's just a straight road. Let's see if you could do it. And I actually got it for a little while after making the whole truck shake because I didn't understand how to clutch the truck, so it kept shutting up on me. But somehow, some way, I got it for a little bit. But it got to a scary part because after he saw that I got it, and he saw that we were on a straightaway, he was like, "All right, looks like you're fine. Wake me up when we get to a turn." So
Oh,
I was like, oh God.
I swear it does. As soon as you start talking about, truck driving and that you got a chance to drive, immediately Over the Top came to my mind,
Yeah.
and just that whole scene of him talking about he's feeling like a milkshake, because of the clutch issue. But yeah, that's pretty cool. What a fun experience. So you grew up Pico Rivera. What was it like? What was it like for you growing up? Going to school, friends that you grew up with. What kind of things did you like as a kid, other than pro wrestling?
Uh, when I was very like young, I was into obviously like cartoons and things that other kids like that are into. Um, like as far as cartoons, I was like super into the Americanized animes like Pokemon and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I played a good amount of sports. Uh, a little bit of like fo- football when I was younger. Basketball, baseball. I was never super into that stuff as much, but it was more of a thing where I think my parents just wanted to keep me busy.
Mm-hmm.
Pico Rivera, especially before, was kind of a rougher neighborhood. Of a lot of my, let's just say, being connected to a lot of my family, it was very easy to get into a bad lifestyle at the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gangs and stuff out here, so it was
Right.
very possible. So my parents went ahead and kept me busy. That's why when I was younger, and my one it was one of my older brothers that started backyard wrestling, and I would follow him and his friends. My dad would be like, "Well, it's better them than being out there on the streets."
Right.
So,
Right. Now tell me so you talked about your dad being a truck driver and being gone a lot. What kind of impact did that have on you as a young boy growing up, with your father not being there as much, and how much of an impact did your big brothers play in your life as far as being role models?
uh, well, when I was, I can't say much about my dad like not being there to raise me when he was, because he would actually come home every day. I know that some truck drivers they go on long trips across state. My dad
Hmm.
always had a contract where he came home every day, and sure he was tired, but he always spent time. And so
Hmm.
so I'm not gonna act like he wasn't there when I was a kid.
Right.
But my brothers, at that time, I can't say that it was too much, because they were at that age where they were teenagers. They didn't want to hang out with their kid brother.
Hmm.
You know how it is. It, the oldest one, he was like already like near high school, starting college when I was still a kid.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but for him, his name is Ray. He would actually take care of us when if my mom would go with my dad on the truck.
Hmm.
So he was more of like a parenting figure when they weren't around. He
Hmm.
was the one that would get me and my sister and be like, okay, well they're not here. Let's go grab something to eat. I'm working, so I could take you guys and
Hmm.
take care of you guys that way. As far as my other older brother, he was the one that was like closer as more of a friend, and his connection to his friends got me further into wrestling, so that you know it
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a brother. I have two brothers myself. One is 4 years younger than me. One is 7 years younger than me. And we growing up as young boys, we're all pretty close, and we all did martial arts together. We all rode bikes and skateboards and built forts and ramps and all that stuff when we were kids. But my youngest brother was the one that we had the strongest connection growing up, because we both did martial arts for a long time together. As a matter of fact, my youngest brother ended up opening up a martial arts school. But I remember I would pick him up from school every day and bring him to the karate school with me. And since I had to teach, he just learned how to teach by being with me. So it was just kind of an interesting relationship. How I kind of felt that parental responsibility with him a lot too, because I would pick him up from school. I'd have to get him fed. I'd have to get him, you know, to the karate school with me. I'd have to help, remember bring his uniform, and and then working with each other, much later as he got older, was a whole different story. But yeah, I just, I always kind of like to see what that dynamic is like. I never grew up. I didn't have any sisters, but you had a younger sister,
Older.
older
Older.
sister. Oh, so
Yeah.
she was older than the the brother that was 10 years older.
Yeah, I have no. I have two oldest brothers, older sister, it's me, and then I have a younger brother.
Oh, wow. Big family.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, tell me more about your other brother and your sister.
My older sister was probably someone that I was closer to when I was growing up, just for the fact that we were much closer in age. She's about a year and a half older than me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's sister. You're not always gonna get along with your sister the same way you'd get along with your brothers.
Right.
And on the other end, my brother is actually much younger than me. He's about 8 years younger.
Okay.
So, what pretty much as I was growing up in like late middle school, high school is when he was very young, and yeah, he just turned 20 recently. So
Wow.
it was fun to actually see him, come into his own, and he's still doing that little by little.
So you kind of had the best of both worlds, where you had, the older siblings that kind of took you under, and you had a younger sibling where maybe you kind of took him under a little bit.
Yeah, probably a little more than my other brothers had to, because my parents split up around the time that I was in high school.
Hmm.
So now the whole thing that I was saying that my dad wasn't there for because of work, he really wasn't around as much.
Hmm.
So I really had to try my best to take up that role for my brother, because my older brothers, they're already out of the house. They
Hmm.
weren't around either. So
Right.
yeah.
How did that affect you? My parents have been married. I'll be 48. No, I think I'll be 49 this year. My parents were married a year before I was born. So almost 50 years my parents have been married. And but I have friends, that their parents split up, and it really took a toll on them. How did that play into your life when your parents split up?
Um, it hit me pretty hard at the time. If we're gonna be completely honest, I still haven't talked to the man since.
Mm,
So I kind of lost the relationship with it. It to me, for him, it just seemed really seemed hypocritical of everything that he taught me growing up,
hmm.
and I just haven't we haven't connected since.
Yeah. Is that hard for you to deal with?
Um, Sometimes, because sometimes I think about it, or sometimes well, we're all getting older, right?
Hmm.
So you see people that talk about how they have people that pass away on them, and how they have unresolved issues, and it's
Hmm.
it's something that you worry about from time to time.
Hmm.
But then I don't know, it's kind of like a back and forth thing.
Yeah. Well, something that comes to my mind when I'm talking about, you not having your dad there, and having that disconnect. What I've noticed from you that didn't really I didn't really see it or feel it right away, especially because I didn't know you well. But you seem like, a locker room leader at MPW now, and you seem like someone that people really um, gravitate towards for information and experience. And because you had so much experience, do you feel that sometimes being that big brother to the wrestlers that you work with, stems from kind of your family life?
Possibly, but it could also it might be from the fact that I was on the other end for so long, because I'm 33 now, but I started around 16, 17.
Hmm.
For the longest time, I was the youngest guy in the locker room.
Right.
So there were so many guys that I was having to go to and ask for help and assistance.
Hmm.
So I've been on the other end. So now I try my best to help as much as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I definitely see that more now, especially in your role. So let's talk about wrestling. How did you said you were introduced to it, kind of early on. Uh, Most of us that have been involved in professional wrestling were fans growing up, loved wrestling. But how did you actually get involved? I know you trained at Santino Brothers. So how did you find that school? How were you introduced?
Well, actually, it all started back with what, like I said, my older brother, him and his friends would do backyard wrestling.
Hmm.
So I started off as just a referee, just following them around. Then when I got a little bit older, I got in the ring with them.
Hmm.
But some of the people that would backyard wrestle with them, went on to be indie wrestlers. So I don't know if you know of Rico Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
That's my brother's friend. They went to high school together,
Okay.
and that's him. And there was another one at the time. His name was Johnny Nightmare. Back in the day, he started a promotion called Hybrid Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
Uh, so with Hybrid Pro Wrestling, they owned the ring itself. So them two lived together. It was Rico Dynamite and Johnny Nightmare. And in the back of their house, they kept the ring. So they're like, well, maybe we can start teaching some people.
Mm-hmm.
So I was part of their first class, the Hybrid Pro Wrestling School. But the thing is, both of those guys, they trained at the XPW school,
Mm-hmm.
the XPW Asylum back in the day. So after maybe a couple of months of wrestling, Rico Dynamite came to us and he was like, hey, I've taught you guys the basics. I taught you what I feel I could teach you, but I think I took you guys as far as I could. I'm gonna bring in some other people now that could take you farther, and that's actually how Santino Brothers started because he brought in Chaos, he brought in Supreme, he brought in Angel, he brought in all of those guys that were his trainers at the XPW Asylum,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually the Hybrid Pro Wrestling School transformed into Santino Brothers. So I was actually part of their first class.
Wow. Well, that's some history for a lot of people in the SoCal indie scene that know Santino's is well known
Yeah,
in SoCal, right? And a lot of great wrestlers came out of there, and so now we're hearing history. And growing up, I didn't really care about history. I hated history class. I didn't really like school, as a matter of fact. But now especially when I'm talking to people on the podcast here, I love hearing these history lessons and history stories about how things started, because it really kind of talks about the relationships that started so early on and how how they developed over time. And I think it was really cool when you said that Rico said that as a leader said, I've taken you as far as I can take you. I want to bring in people that will help take you to another level. And some people may gloss over that, and it's just kind of a very subtle lesson. But sometimes you have to realize that we don't know it all, and someone out there can help make us better. And for him to be able to do that right away, and it spawned a pretty well-known school and a very successful school as it is today. So tell me about early training. What was training like for you? Because I've been involved with Millennium Wrestling Academy. As a matter of fact, Danny and I were the ones that created Millennium Wrestling Academy, and started a beginners program. Truth be told, I was watching Chaos and how he was promoting his school and what he was doing. I said, this is the way that we need to do it. And we formed that beginners program, and now it's really taken off. But I've realized, and as Danny and I talk a lot about the new up and coming wrestlers, for whatever it's worth, it just seems like things are a little softer, a little, people in general are not used to what it was. And I mean, we can go back generations and generations, and our parents, grandparents, and so forth would tell us the very same thing. But I think you
right.
know what I'm getting at. When you started out, wrestling was pretty tough. It was tough to get in, and you had to be tough to be a wrestler. And how was that for you when you started?
Scary, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like I honestly halfway didn't want to go the first couple of times that I heard that Chaos and Supreme were coming in, because I would watch those videos and be like, oh God. Like I was big fans of these guys, but I was a teenager. I was totally intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
And it that was the most interesting thing about Supreme, I'd say. When I actually met him, he's not that much, like maybe like 5'6", 5'7".
Right.
He's not a super huge guy, but he
Mm-hmm.
carried himself like he was 8 foot tall. And to me, I was literally looking down on him, but I couldn't think that in my mind. It's
Mm-hmm.
like when they talk about how a horse listens to a human because they have no idea that they're way larger than people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just the way he carried himself.
Yeah, and I find it so ironic in the way that, again, when I first met you and when I first heard about you, there was just this intimidating aura based on more your gimmick than who you were and who I'm talking to right now. But I mean, like, when you come to the ring, and you do your thing, like I know that there's people that are just feeling that same feeling that you felt when you stepped in there with Supreme and Chaos in your early training. But what was the hardest part for you in professional wrestling? Was it the physicality? Was it the psychology? Was it the just how to work? What was the most challenging thing for you?
Um, I'm gonna say it was all fairly difficult, to be honest. Because let's be real, even as a teenager, I'm not one of those teenagers that are super like in shape, can run a couple of miles, no problem. I wasn't the most athletic kid in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that where I loved it enough, so I stuck with it. And I wasn't either one of those guys where everything came easy to me, because I trained with those guys and I would see those guys, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow, you get it like that. But I needed to do it one or two more times. And the fact that you like you said, you talk about my character and how I was super into it. I wasn't that guy back then. I was a very shy kid,
Mm-hmm.
very hunched over, kept to myself, really like, uh, uh, don't talk to me, just quiet. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll agree and say yes to whatever you want. Just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
How
just don't want
how
to upset people.
how was Pinky Santino born?
The name I've always had. That actually came from my backyard wrestling days. I could honestly say I have no idea how I got the name T. To be honest, one day they just started calling me that. I do know that we did have a lot of Chris's in the group, so they had to figure out something else to call me,
Mm-hmm.
because there was three different Chris's and all of us would turn when they were there say Chris. So yeah, they had to figure out something different to call me, and that's I don't know how they came up with that, but they did. Um, I came up with Santino because we were part of the Santino Brothers Wrestling School, and at that time they very much instilled pride in the school to us. So I figured, if we are the Santino brothers, it makes sense that our last name would be Santino.
Mm-hmm.
And the first Santino obviously was Mongol Santino. So we actually I asked his permission, and he was okay with it for me to take that last name as far as my wrestling name.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about Mongol Santino.
He's a tough guy. He always has been, always will be. He's the kind of guy that you don't want to mess with. And he came from one of the harder wrestling schools in all of Southern California. And Chaos will tell you the same thing. He came out of Slammers. Him and both Angels came out of Slammers, where, just like you were saying, where everyone talks about how every generation before them was that much harder. At Slammers, the school, every day they all trained in trunks and barefoot every
Hmm.
time. And Mongol would tell us that it was because they instilled in them, if for some reason you're traveling somewhere and your bag gets lost, you're good to go. Just go to Big Five, get a pair of trunks, barefoot, you're ready to go. So yeah, they trained in some really hard style, and it was a pleasure to be able to get in there with them. And a lot of what Santino's is now stemmed off of what they taught at Slammers, and what Mongo brought to the table.
Hmm. Now you started wrestling when you were a teenager, and in your bio it says former professional wrestler. I still think that you've got a couple more matches in you, at least.
I
Um,
hope so. Hope so.
how many matches have you had in your career? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've been doing, well, like I said, I've been doing this since I was like 16 or 17, and I stopped around 31,
Hmm.
possibly. So
Hmm.
I was doing it for quite some time, almost every weekend. And I still do some matches here and there. Believe it or not, people don't realize it's me, but I'm still doing them. But they're the easier stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Talk about some of the organizations that you've worked at. Obviously, you started with Hybrid, then went into Santino's, and then currently you're working with MPW a lot. But there's a lot of in between. You've worked shows, all over. So talk about some of the other promotions that you've worked for.
Sure. Early on, when I just started wrestling, we actually, the first show that all the Santino guys did was called Evolucha. That was supposed to be mostly just Santino guys, and the plan was to make us exclusive to that show. But I guess it was more of a thing where the deals fell through. It was hard for them to find sponsorship at the time because we were just starting.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, we all kind of went into the lucha libre market because we were brand new to the business. So one of the things that is, if you know Angel from XPW days, he actually did for us was he would actually get himself onto lucha shows that, and he would give them a good price. But it was one of those things of, hey, book my students and I'll give you a good price.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't thank him enough. So we would do a show called MWF starting off, and we were doing that every week. Another show, and that show actually helped us out a lot because we were running every single Sunday, so that helped us get a lot of experience in front of fans, which is, when you're starting off, that's the most important thing you could have. It's, great to get paid a lot of money and stuff if you can, but the experience is more worth more than that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after that, we went over and frequented Battleground Wrestling that would run out of Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
Out of I don't know if you remember the stepfather and the redheaded stepchild.
I don't think so.
Uh, well, it was them along with Foob Dog and well, a good amount of SoCal talent was there,
Mm-hmm.
and we wrestled there for quite a bit. That actually led me to being the first time having my own group that I was the leader of. That's where the Nobodies came from, which was a big jump for me because eventually Dave Marquez, I guess, he saw that group and he liked it, and he actually brought it on to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood,
Hmm.
and obviously that was a big jump for me to actually be able to get that on TV and
Mm-hmm.
do my thing on there, and that group, it went over pretty well, and it was one of those things where I started off as a heel, but little by little, the fans just got into the character. It seemed like, but from there, it was there. I did some shows for MPW also. MPW was later on, actually, not until More Park, because that's also when I met you.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't around to that time. But before that, I was making trips out to New Mexico for a company called DWO. Luckily, I've been able to work on in Arizona, up in Oregon, up in Washington. So I've been up and down the Pacific Coast. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
so you've had obviously a lot of experience and experience outside of your home group, and that's one thing that we see and we've always kind of encouraged is for people to go out and because you can get a little bit complacent working in the same place, all the time and working with the same people all the time. My goals. I was just happy to get in the ring at 38 years old, right? So, my background was solely and only at MPW, but I've seen everybody, from the top to the bottom, branch out even more and more recently, and also bringing in talent from outside of our group in, because that's how you grow and that's how you change and that's how you learn. And, my question is, what were your goals when you started to get going in wrestling? Did you have goals? I mean, I always ask this to every pro wrestler. Did you have goals to, make it to, wherever? What, most people would say WWE.
right.
Now it would be AEW is another option. Back in the day, it could have been WCW or ECW. What were your goals as a wrestler?
Well, it was just always a dream to wrestle. I would always tell myself, because like I said, I was kind of a shy kid, kind of a little down on myself, and even the way I looked at myself is, wow, if I could get into the ring with these guys that are way better than me,
Mm-hmm.
and grow up and later on in an older age say, hey, well, at least I did it. At least I went for it. Um, I could say that's good enough, but I'm not gonna lie and not say it wasn't always a dream to get somewhere like the WWE where I can make this a job.
Hmm.
And I think that's always the goal, just to make this. If you could afford to make wrestling your living, that that would be magical.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And at one point, was that happening for you?
No, no. I've always had other jobs and stuff
Hmm.
along with wrestling. It's very few and far between the guys that could actually make it a living as a
Hmm.
professional wrestler. But it's usually the guys that you won't see them in one state every week. Those guys, it's usually guys like Willie Mack that are traveling country to country constantly,
Hmm.
and that's the only way you can make a living off of it.
What do you think is the one thing that may have held you back, or if you would have done anything different to get to that next level, what might that be?
Uh, Probably my body type. In all reality, um, the companies I've been told by certain people that have worked for the company where a lot of times it's not, they don't even look at your work in the ring. It's like they've gotten people signed by looking at an 8x10, and if
Hmm.
you look great, it's going to make you go far.
Hmm.
Um, and in all reality, it's just luck. It, a lot of it comes to luck. There's so many wrestlers out there, and there's some that are great. They're excellent wrestlers. They got a great body, and it's just they weren't lucky enough to get seen by the right people at the right time.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, it's a lot of luck. It's like picking a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. Well, I've had Steve, right? Steve Adkins on here,
Hmm.
Seth Skyfire. And, when we talked, I mean, and he was in OVW, he's like, there really wasn't anything I could have done different because I couldn't be any taller. I couldn't be any bigger. But I mean, if anybody goes and watches any of his matches, I mean, what an amazing worker. But, again, sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's just something that, you can't really control. Cause I mean, in the pro wrestling world, I mean, you have a great look for your gimmick. I mean, you definitely fit the part. We talk about, what makes you different than the people that are sitting in the chairs. Well, I can tell you for 100% that, when you come to the ring, everybody's looking and going, yeah, that's a pro wrestler for sure. Right. And
Right.
now you talked
I
about,
appreciate that.
your body changing. You had some health issues and you had some life changes. You lost a lot of weight. Let's talk about that.
The weight loss, it um I was just trying to do it for myself at the time. I had gotten to a lar I was around I think at my heaviest I was around 380.
Wow.
So yeah, I got pretty big for a while. So I made a conscious effort to go ahead and try to trim down. So I started hitting the gym more and more, and I was able to drop a good amount of the weight. The massive weight loss that a lot of people saw was when I got into the keto diet, but that was during the pandemic. So that made it even more drastic when people saw me, just for the fact that we couldn't really see each other that often.
Hmm.
So so I lost a lot of weight, and then people saw me again, and they're like, "Whoa, what happened?" So
Wow. So you were at your heaviest at 380. What are you currently weighing in at now?
around 245,
Okay. I mean,
245,
that's a
yeah.
significant amount of weight loss. Considering, you changed your workout habits, you changed your diet. Um, what was your whole purpose behind it? Were there health problems that you were having? Was there or was it just one morning you woke up, you looked in the mirror and you said, I need to make a change?
I felt like they're a little bit of both. I would see pictures of myself and see that it's like, whoa, you're getting bigger. And then I'm a big fan of theme parks. When I got to the point where I started not to be able to fit on rides, I was like, oh, this is becoming an issue.
Right.
It's kind of embarrassing. So yeah, it was partly that, and then partly I was suffering from like high blood pressure and things like that, and I could feel my wind. It wasn't where it was in the past. So I was like, okay, this is getting out of hand. I got to make sure I got to do something about this.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where I was working at a bank at the time where I gained a lot of my weight, but the bank itself was inside of a supermarket. So
Hmm.
we spent a lot of that time getting those day old donuts and coming and bringing them into the office. And yeah, so that's where I gained a lot of my weight at the time. So
Now, did you
uh,
have anybody helping you with your workouts, with your meal planning, changing your diet, inspiration, motivation? Did you have people there that were helping you?
yeah, well, guys like Rico Dynamite, Joey Chaos, they would help us out with workouts and stuff, but also my old tag team partner, Babe Fury, he was one of those guys that would actually get up and go to the gym with me, and he got me into a routine right there because
Hmm.
he at the time was starting to really go himself too. So we got into better shape, and all those guys and hate like Tito, Rico, and Ray, we would go to the gym with each other as much as possible. But we don't always live next to each other. But
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, so
So
I forgot to ask about this when we were, a few minutes ago as we were talking about your wrestling career. How did hate get started? What was that built on?
um, we were just a lot of us came out of Santino Brothers, and we were just a group chat. We were just a group of friends that we all talked to each other. And we would see how things were, and we're like, it honestly started as an idea of, well, what if we were all a group and we could go somewhere and just like wrestle all the newer guys and help them,
Hmm.
because if they wrestle with us, we have a lot of experience and we could turn it into something there. So little by little that became hate over at UEW. When UEW was running out of East LA, they were the first company to go ahead and use us as a group,
Hmm.
and we had a pretty good run there. There was a good amount of us, and yeah, I thought it was pretty successful.
Well, it's interesting that a group called Hate was started in essence by a group of people that wanted to help other
Well,
people.
yeah, and I'm making it sound real nice, but we didn't want to help people till it was a good amount of frustration that we would notice and be like, we someone needs to get out here and help these guys because
Right.
yeah.
So currently you're kind of on a hiatus from an active wrestling career. You've been doing a lot more commentating, a lot more announcing. How does it feel to be in the ring but not doing the physical part of what you love to do?
It's different. It's different. Because I remember as a wrestler, I would talk to the commentators and announcers that would kind of make themselves seem like a tough guy. But I realized when I was a worker, when I was a wrestler and wrestling, it's like all you're doing is taking away from the product. So now I have to remember those days and realize that I'm enhancement now. I'm not the one in the ring. My job is to make these guys look as good as possible.
Hmm.
So if that means, you know, if one of these tough guys come out, I'm gonna do my best. Although people remember who I was, a lot of those people don't know who I was. That's the nature of the indie business.
Hmm.
Independent wrestling fans come and go. There's some that'll stick there forever, and they're the ones that are most adamant about having your back.
Hmm.
But the new fans don't know that you were a wrestler. And if I'm gonna get up there and get into a like if someone's out there being a monster and I'm gonna go up there and get into their face, why are they gonna believe that they're a monster when the announcer's walking up to
Hmm.
them and trying to be a tough guy? No, at this point, it's my job to go ahead and take a step back and be like, whoa, hey,
Mm.
give you know, you're the tough guy. It's not me, because
Right.
it's my job to make you look good. And a lot of people that do announcing and ring work need to realize that where you're no longer the star, you're enhancing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is that hard for you to accept, having been in the spotlight for so long?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
it's more of a thing where, especially when I'm commentating, your job is to try your best to make everything look as good as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything always looks as good as possible, and sometimes you're sitting there and you're thinking in your head, "Ooh, I wouldn't have done that."
Mm.
It's like, or you talk to these guys on the back, and you sometimes it's cases where I've worked with these guys in the past, and it's like, come on, man, you're better than that. I know you could do better than this. Come on, but you can't vocalize that. So you kind of just gotta
Hmm.
sit there, kind of bite your tongue and talk to these guys in the back, and hopefully something that you tell them will register, and hope you see them do what you feel like they could do next time.
Mm-hmm. So before I ask you some of the last few questions, I know we're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes because you got to get to an appointment. Um, but when you're in the ring or when you're in the back, um, do you feel that people accept your advice, and do you feel that most of the people are willing to listen, or do you feel maybe it's the other way around?
I worry about it sometimes, to be honest. I'm not the type of guy that go. For some people that have been open to taking my advice in the past, I
Hmm.
will go up and talk to them and be like, "Hey, you got you got to do this. I saw this, this, and that." And
Hmm.
those guys are usually the ones that are like, "All right, thank you." But there's some people that have never come up to ask me my thoughts and stuff like that, which I usually don't bug them too much.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's more of a thing where I'm not gonna if you don't want my advice, I'm not gonna give it to you. But I also think it's interesting because sometimes I see newer guys come in and they don't want advice. They don't seek it out. They don't ask for it. And I'm sitting there at that table watching every bit of every show.
Hmm.
And then I go to the back, and the guys that are asking advice from me are guys like Ray Rosas, guys like Tyler Bateman, um, guys like Miggy Rose, where it's like, and guys like Primo, who's the tag team champion at MPW right now.
Hmm.
And those guys are the ones asking me for advice when the younger guys aren't. And it's like some of these guys are past me and they're asking me for advice because those guys are the ones that want to learn.
Hmm.
Where some guys are gonna shell up and be like, um, will get offended by your advice.
Hmm.
And it's not my job to try to offend anyone or ruin their good match or what they thought they had.
Hmm.
So it's like I shrug my shoulders sometimes and I'd be like, well, it's up to them. If you want to learn, you can. But
Right.
there one piece of advice that about taking advice that I've always lived by is no matter who's giving you the advice, listen to the advice, whether it be good advice, whether it be bad advice, because you never know something that's going to work for you immediately or something that's going to work for you later or something
Hmm.
that might not work at all. It
Right.
might not. It might not apply to you ever. But the fact that you sat there and listened to it, you took it in, and
Hmm.
either you applied it or you didn't, but you have it in your back pocket if it turns out that you need it later.
Right. Right. That's good advice. I mean, it's interesting too. Like you said, the most experienced people in the room are the ones asking for advice or asking for feedback, where the people that have little to no experience are it's just that immaturity, regardless of age, just immaturity of being in the craft. It's kind of like the more you know what you don't know and how much you don't know. And sometimes those people that just get in there right away think that they know it all. I don't know where that comes from
Well,
though.
sometimes I think it's like what you talked about earlier, where it's just different nowadays. Um, sometimes it feels like the newer guys they feel like you're coming down on them more
Hmm.
than you're trying to help them.
Hmm.
Or you're maybe like you're trying to embarrass them in front of everyone else because I've also seen people getting advice and they're like, well, can we talk about this on a training day when it's like more private instead of like wanting to take advice right then and there in the locker room. And yeah, it seems like it's a generational thing where they it they feel like they're getting embarrassed and they're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about me and you, but like sports teams growing up, my trainers like Supreme, he would yell at you then and there.
Mm-hmm.
So you became harder with that time and more open to getting advice and having people tell you you were wrong and stuff without getting embarrassed because you knew you were going to be wrong from time to time. But now it's different.
Mm-hmm.
People, uh, for lack of a better way of putting it, people seem to be a little more sensitive nowadays, where there's a lot more lines that you have to tiptoe around and worry about crossing, where people will see you kind of as a bully
Mm-hmm.
or that you're going out to hurt people instead of help them. Whereas I see it as if someone is willing to, back then you would see it as if someone is willing to put the energy to yell and scream and stress out about you doing things correctly,
Mm-hmm.
it's because they care enough to go ahead and put that energy in, into seeing you succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of energy I try to put, but I also know that it's not the same now. It just plain and simple. You got to rock those lines very carefully nowadays,
Yep.
or else
I
you just get
I agree. I mean, listen, we're I'm a little bit older, right? I'm going to be 49 this year. When my coaches were quiet, I was worried. When they were
right,
yelling at me, I knew that they were paying attention. I mean, at the end of the day, that it just kind of comes down to that. And yeah, how people accept information is can be different with everybody. But I think that just in general, and I'm not sure what the fix is because there is a very fine line of being on one side or the other, right? I mean, I've definitely seen coaches that bully their students or bully um, you know wrestlers or whatever, and that you're not going to bring out the best by doing that. But
right,
there's a way that we can do it that in the end, I think the relationship. One of the things that I got out of pro wrestling that I love the most is the relationships with my trainers, relationships with the other wrestlers, relationships with the locker room, and I think that that's what allowed me to not only take advice but to give advice when necessary. So I want to wrap this up real quick here in the next 2 minutes because I know you got to go, but I do want to talk about it because we mentioned it in your bio. Currently on dialysis, waiting
yep.
for a kidney. What's that like?
Believe it or not, this might be a record for you, Master Flame. I might be the first and only guest ever to do this interview actually while on dialysis.
Oh boy.
If you take a look here, I got a machine going right now. So
And I thought that might be the case. So what was the challenge that put you on dialysis, and what's your health like right now?
in all reality, I've always had kidney issues. It was something that I've always had since growing up. So I didn't realize that it was a problem. We're gonna get a little medical here. Every time I would urinate, there would be foam in my urine, like bubbles coming out. But I've seen that my whole life, so I never thought that was different. It wasn't until I went to a doctor, and this was when I was a kid, and they were like, "Huh, there's protein in your urine. That's not really normal." So they kind of looked at it. They did like um, ultrasounds and stuff, and they're like, "Well, they look okay for now," but little by little, they just got worse and worse
Mm,
throughout the years. When I did the keto diet, they said it wouldn't have caused this, but it didn't help
mm-hmm,
for the fact that you the way that diet works is you eat no absolutely no carbs and absolutely no sugars, and you're teaching your body to start burning fat instead of carbs as energy,
mm-hmm,
which is kind of hard on your body.
mm-hmm,
So that I believe that took a little bit of a toll on there that got me there. So when I found out that I had to get on dialysis, it was actually for a completely separate problem. I actually ended up with back pain one day. So I went to the doctors for there's just a knot on my back, so they ended up giving me some steroids and stuff to go ahead and loosen up the pain. And I was taking those pills for that, and on Halloween of 2020, I just felt my heart beating really. It wasn't beating fast; it was beating hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to sleep, and I could just like feel it like pulsing hard, hard, hard. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, that ain't normal. So I went to the ER for that, and they went ahead and they're like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and run some tests on you. We'll do an EKG and everything. And it seemed like once the medicine ran through my system, I was fine as far as my heart went. But since they test everything, they're like, your kidneys are not looking good.
Oh, wow.
So it was at that time where they're like, we're gonna keep you and have a nephrologist go ahead, a kidney doctor go ahead and take a look at you and see what we have to do going forward. And that's when they let me know it's like, hey, uh, we're gonna have to start you on dialysis. So yeah, it was one of those things where it was a shot to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I knew that with dialysis, that like in the beginning there was a tube sticking out of my chest, and that's when we do that kind of dialysis that is normal that people know of, where your blood gets cycled out through a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a choice of doing that through my arm or what I'm actually doing, which is called peritoneal dialysis. So with peritoneal dialysis, I have a tube sticking out of my abdomen, and the way that it works is I have these. Well, I can show you right here. I have these bags right here.
Mm-hmm.
They're full of like almost like a sugar water um fluid, which gets pumped into my abdomen throughout the night for a certain amount of hours for the day, and then it gets cycled out, and that's actually cleaning out my system. And the way that they explained it to me is the way that it's like sugar water. If you ever put sugar on top of strawberries and you just let it sit for a while, you'll notice that little by little, the strawberries will start secreting the juice from inside of the strawberry. So that's actually what's happening to me, where I'm pumping the sugar water into my abdomen, and the toxins that are in my body are actually getting brought out and getting flushed out that way. The
Wow.
only pain about it is that it's 11 hours every night.
Wow.
So it's definitely something that's taking some getting used to.
So it's definitely a life changer. And what do you see happening in the future? What's in the future for you?
Well, I have good doctors. That's what's most important. And in all reality, I'm waiting on a kidney. It's not the easiest thing. When I'm on a donor list at Cedar Sinai. They say if I could get a donor to go ahead and go through everything quicker, I could go. If we're a match, we could go ahead and do that. But it's not the easiest thing to ask. Go around asking people for a body part.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
so hopefully, if people are donors, it's one of those things where it's a morbid thought in all reality, where you have to wait for someone that, let's just say, is not going to need the body part anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and and do everything that you can to make the most of that body part that you're given, because I've thought about it time and time again. This family is allowing someone to give up a body part to give you so you can move on and have a better life. And it's one of those things where I constantly think, if I get that, I'm gonna do my best to make the best of it and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that whoever made that sacrifice for me um, didn't do it in vain, and I do whatever I can with it.
Right. Well, I wish you all the best, in luck and health and getting that opportunity to have that transplant for you. And I also look forward to, hopefully seeing you back in the ring in an active role at some point again. You're always fun to watch, always great to have around. Thank you for being on the show today and just kind of talking with us about your life and history and what's going on with you. I hope that everybody watching this live took something from it. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop those in the comments wherever you're watching, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't know. I don't know where they're watching. Somebody's watching. Brent Obillo is watching. Blessings from Brent. Thanks, Brent, for watching. But again, Pinky, thanks for being on the show and sharing with us today. Wish you all the best. Hope to see you soon. And we'll see
And
everybody next week.
and just to remember, everyone, MPW every Friday night. If you can't make it out to the shows in Chatsworth, we're also on YouTube. Follow us every week. The only show in all of Southern California that is there every single Friday night. And, that's a rare occasion that we actually have storylines and everything like that because we're there every Friday night. So follow us.
Just like a true worker to promote the show on his way out. Hey, good stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Pinky. Hang out for about 60 seconds while I play this video if you have time. Just a quick chat before you go. But again, guys, check back with us on Wednesday with my next guest. Every Monday and Wednesday, check back here. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow Millennium Pro Wrestling as well. And if you would like to be a guest on the Master Motivation Show, or you know someone that would make a great guest on the Master Motivation Podcast, please let me know. You can message me, find me on my Linktree link, and you can message me from there. But for now, make it a great day, and we'll see you guys real soon.